The flight was supposed to be ordinary. She had boarded the plane with a simple plan in mind: sit quietly by the window, enjoy the clouds, and reach her destination in peace. It was a commercial flight like any other, filled with families, business travelers, and tired faces hoping for rest. She wasn't nervous, not even slightly. She trusted the process of flying, the pilots, the crew, and the routine that had carried millions safely before her. As the plane climbed higher, she leaned against the cold window and watched the city shrink below, lights glowing like scattered stars. The engines roared, steady and confident, and everything felt normal. The flight attendants moved through the aisles with practiced grace, offering drinks and smiles. The air was calm, and passengers began to settle in for the long ride. But life often changes in a blink. It began with a sound, faint at first, then louder. A strange cough from the cockpit followed by silence. No one noticed at first. After all, passengers rarely thought about what went on behind that locked door. The calm voice of the captain usually filled the cabin from time to time, reassuring everyone that all was well. But this time there was nothing, just the steady hum of the engines and the occasional chatter among passengers. Then it happened. The intercom crackled, but instead of the captain's voice there was confusion. A sharp, uneven breath came through, followed by a thud. The words that followed froze her heart. Mayday. Mayday. It wasn't calm, wasn't controlled. It sounded desperate. People looked at each other, unsure. The word Mayday wasn't something passengers expected to hear on a routine flight. Some thought it was a mistake, maybe a miscommunication. But deep down, everyone felt the tension. Something was very wrong. Moments later, a flight attendant rushed down the aisle, her face pale but composed, whispering urgently to another crew member. The whispers carried, and the truth began to spread like fire through dry grass. The pilot had collapsed. The one person responsible for guiding the plane through the sky was no longer able to do his job. Her chest tightened. She wasn't a pilot, not even close. She was just another passenger among many. But as panic rippled through the cabin, she felt an odd pull inside, a mix of fear and responsibility. She didn't want to be the hero, but she couldn't ignore the sight of the crew hurrying, the trembling voices, and the realization that hundreds of lives were now hanging in the balance. The co-pilot was still there, of course, but the radio voice had made it clear. They were in trouble. Something about the situation was beyond routine training. The Mayday call hadn't come lightly. She watched as one flight attendant tried to calm the passengers, reassuring them with words that didn't match the fear in her eyes. Another disappeared into the cockpit, returning moments later with a look that confirmed the worst. The pilot wasn't waking up. The cabin, once filled with quiet confidence, now buzzed with nervous energy. A baby cried. A man muttered a prayer under his breath. Someone asked loudly what was going on, and others shushed him, as though silence could protect them. Through it all, she sat frozen, her hands gripping the armrests. Her heart pounded so hard she thought others might hear it. She wasn't trained for this. She wasn't supposed to be anything more than a passenger. But when she heard the second desperate call over the radio, Mayday, Captain Unresponsive, something inside her shifted. The weight of reality pressed down. This wasn't just a story she would read in the news later. She was inside it. She was living it. And though she had no idea how, she felt she might soon be asked to do the unthinkable. The plane kept flying forward, steady for now, but the question echoed through every mind on board. Who would bring them down safely? And as she looked toward the locked cockpit door, she knew this was only the beginning of a nightmare none of them had prepared for. The silence after the second Mayday felt heavier than thunder. It wasn't the sound of panic that filled the cabin now. It was the absence of it. People stared at one another, wide-eyed, waiting for someone to explain what would happen next. The engines kept their steady roar, and the wings cut through the night sky, but the plane suddenly felt fragile, like a giant bird that could falter at any moment. She leaned forward, her palms sweating against the armrests. The cabin lights glowed softly, but they only made the fear in people's faces clearer. The truth was spreading quickly. The captain was unconscious, and the co-pilot sounded overwhelmed. Then a flight attendant appeared again. Her lips trembled, but her voice tried to hold firm. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "the situation is under control. Please remain calm," but it wasn't under control. Everyone knew it. The way her eyes darted toward the cockpit told another story. A man in the aisle seat leaned out and whispered, "If the pilot's down, who's flying this thing?" Others began to murmur the same question, louder each time. She pressed her forehead to the window, staring into the darkness outside. The stars felt closer than the earth. Her mind raced, searching for answers, but nothing made sense. She had boarded this plane to travel, not to face the kind of danger she had only seen in movies. Suddenly, the intercom crackled again. This time it was the co-pilot's voice, but it wasn't steady like passengers expected. It carried strain, as if each word weighed too much. "This is your first officer speaking," the voice said. "Our captain has suffered a medical emergency. I am flying the aircraft. We are in communication with air traffic control. I need everyone to stay calm. The situation is serious, but we are doing everything possible to ensure your safety." The words gave some relief, but the way they were delivered made her heart sink. The co-pilot didn't sound confident. He sounded alone. Passengers exchanged looks, some whispering prayers, others clutching the hands of strangers. A woman in the row ahead quietly wept into her scarf. And then, without warning, a voice burst over the radio, loud enough that it leaked through the intercom feed. It wasn't calm like ground control usually sounded in documentaries or films. It was urgent, sharp. "Do you have anyone on board with flying experience?" Repeat, "Anyone with flying experience?" Her stomach dropped. The flight attendants froze. That question wasn't supposed to be asked on a commercial flight. It was a question that confirmed what everyone feared. The co-pilot might not be able to handle this alone. Her heart pounded. She wasn't a pilot, but she had once spent countless hours with flight simulators on her old computer. She had studied manuals out of curiosity, fascinated by the controls of airplanes. It wasn't real training, not by any standard, but she knew more than the average passenger. Her mind screamed at her, "Stay quiet. Don't draw attention. You could make things worse." But another voice inside whispered louder, "What if no one else steps up?" The attendants hurried down the aisles now, asking the unthinkable, "Is there anyone here with flying experience? Anyone at all?" Most passengers shook their heads quickly. Some laughed nervously as though the question itself was absurd. Others muttered, "This can't be happening." Her throat felt dry. She wanted to raise her hand, but her fingers wouldn't move. Doubt held her like chains. Could she really sit in that cockpit? Could she touch controls that held so many lives in balance? Then she saw the baby again, the one cradled in its mother's arms across the aisle, its tiny face pressed against the blanket, unaware of the danger. That sight hit her harder than the word Mayday ever could. This wasn't just about her fear. It was about everyone on this plane, every soul trusting that someone would take action. Her hand lifted, almost on its own. I know a little," she heard herself say. Her voice shook, barely audible over the nervous chatter. The flight attendant stopped, eyes wide. "You do? What kind of experience?" Her cheeks burned. "Not professional, simulators, manuals. I studied. I can try." The attendant hesitated only a moment before nodding, desperation outweighing doubt. "Come with me." And just like that, she was pulled into the aisle, hundreds of eyes following her every step. Whispers rose like a wave behind her. Some passengers looked hopeful, others skeptical, but all of them stared at her as though she had just stepped onto a stage she never wanted. Her legs shook as she moved toward the cockpit door. The closer she came, the heavier the air felt. Beyond that door lay buttons, switches, controls, and the reality that the lives of everyone on board might soon rest in her untrained hands. She paused at the threshold, her chest heaving. She wasn't a pilot. She wasn't supposed to be here. But the co-pilot's strained voice inside, the sight of the unconscious captain slumped in his seat, and the desperate eyes of the crew left her with only one choice. She stepped inside. The cockpit door closed behind her with a heavy click, shutting her away from the frightened passengers and into a space filled with blinking lights, glowing screens, and a suffocating silence. The captain sat slumped to one side, his headset slipping off, his face pale and still. The co-pilot's hands gripped the controls so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and his eyes darted from the instruments to the horizon outside. He turned when he sensed her presence. For a second, relief flickered across his exhausted face, but it quickly shifted into doubt. "You're the one they found?" he asked, his voice tight with both disbelief and hope. She nodded, though her legs felt weak. "I'm not a real pilot. I've only studied, practiced on simulators." The co-pilot stared at her as if measuring her words, weighing whether a stranger's half-knowledge could make any difference. Then a sharp voice broke through the radio, dragging their attention back. Flight 317, confirm your status. Do you have assistance? The co-pilot pressed his headset. Yes, I have. Someone here. Limited experience, but... His voice cracked before he steadied it. She's all we've got. The radio crackled again, firmer this time. Copy that. Put her on. Her heart thudded. She slipped the headset over her ears, the weight of it pressing her deeper into a role she wasn't sure she could carry. This is me, she said, her voice trembling. Listen carefully, the air traffic controller's voice replied, calm but urgent. You're going to help the first officer keep this plane stable. We'll guide you step by step. You are not alone. The words were steady, but her hands still shook. She lowered herself into the captain's empty seat, the leather cold beneath her. Rows of switches and dials stretched out before her, more complicated than anything she had ever imagined. It wasn't a simulator game anymore. It was real. Every button here had weight. Every mistake had consequence. The co-pilot shot her a glance. Don't touch anything unless I tell you, he warned, his voice firm but not unkind. Just listen, stay calm and follow instructions. She nodded quickly. Her throat felt dry, but she forced herself to breathe. The plane rumbled softly, steady in the air, but every second felt like it was borrowed time. Behind them, the flight attendants hovered near the door, whispering updates about the passengers. Words like panic and calm them drifted through, reminding her that hundreds of lives pressed against her every move. Focus, the controller's voice said in her ears. We're going to run through basics. Can you read the altimeter for me? Left side, circular gauge, numbers rising in thousands. Her eyes darted across the panels until she spotted it. It says 33,000 feet. Good, the voice said, calm as stone. Speed next. Look at the airspeed indicator, top left. 280, she read, her voice steadier this time. The co-pilot exhaled slowly, as if her correct answers gave him a thread of hope. Excellent. Plane is stable. That's step one. Now listen. We'll need you to help manage descent when the time comes. But until then, you need to learn fast. Think you can do that? She swallowed hard. Her chest tightened, but she forced herself to answer. I'll try. The co-pilot gave her a quick nod, softer this time. Trying is enough for now. Minutes dragged by like hours as the controllers guided her through reading instruments, identifying key switches, and repeating instructions. Each time she got something right, a tiny spark of confidence lit inside her. But each glance at the unconscious captain reminded her how fragile this moment was. She dared a question. Is he going to be okay? She asked, eyes flicking toward the motionless man beside her. The co-pilot's jaw tightened. We don't know. Right now, keeping this plane in the air is all that matters. Her stomach twisted, but she nodded. She kept listening, repeating numbers, scanning dials and trying to steady her trembling hands. The voices on the radio became her lifeline, a thread of control in the chaos. Then turbulence struck. The plane jolted sharply, dropping a few feet in a sudden lurch. Gasps erupted from the cabin behind them. Coffee cups toppled. Her own body jerked against the harness, her heart leaping into her throat. Hold it steady, the co-pilot shouted, fighting the controls. Her instinct screamed to grab something, to do anything. Her hand hovered over the panel, desperate to help. Don't touch, he barked, teeth clenched. Not yet. The plane rattled for a few moments longer before leveling out again. She exhaled shakily, her palms slick with sweat. The cabin behind them had gone eerily quiet, as though everyone had run out of breath at once. The radio crackled. Flight 317, status check. The co-pilot answered, his voice strained but steady. We're stable again. For now. The controller's reply was calm but firm. Understood. Begin preparing your passenger assistant. She'll need to handle basic controls soon. Her blood ran cold. She knew this was coming, but hearing it confirmed made her heart race faster. She wasn't just here to watch. They were preparing her to fly. She tightened her grip on the armrest, staring at the endless dark sky outside. She wasn't ready. But ready or not, the moment was approaching when she would have to take the controls. Her fingers hovered over the controls, trembling as if they carried the weight of the entire plane. The co-pilot leaned toward her, his voice low but steady. You're not here to replace me. You're here to help. When I say you follow, that's it. She nodded quickly, but her throat tightened. Helping still meant responsibility. Helping meant no turning back. The radio buzzed again. Passenger assistant, listen carefully. We will start with simple maneuvers. You'll place your hands lightly on the yoke. Do not force it. Just feel the motion of the aircraft. Her eyes darted to the co-pilot, who gave a short nod. Go on, he said. Her hand shook as she reached forward, wrapping her fingers around the yoke. It felt heavier than she imagined, like gripping a wheel tied to invisible muscles in the sky. Every vibration, every slight resistance traveled into her skin. The hum of the engines filled her chest, and for the first time she realized how alive the plane really was. Good, the voice on the radio said. Now breathe. Let the co-pilot guide you. Follow his lead. The co-pilot adjusted the yoke gently, nudging it left, then right. She felt the motion under her fingers, light but certain, like the sway of a boat on water. Her breaths came uneven, but she mimicked the motion carefully. That's it, the co-pilot said, softer now. Don't fight it. Just follow. Behind them, the flight attendants whispered, but their voices faded into the background. All she could hear was the steady beat of her heart, the low hum of the engines, and the occasional crackle of the radio. Minutes passed like hours. Slowly, the fear in her chest shifted. It didn't vanish, but it settled into something sharper. Focus. Her hands steadied. The yoke no longer felt like a stranger. It felt like a partner. Then turbulence hit again, sharper this time. The plane dipped violently, a scream rising from the cabin. Coffee splashed across the panels, dripping down the controls. Her grip tightened instinctively, and she pulled too hard. The nose of the plane tilted upward suddenly. Not so much, the co-pilot barked, grabbing the yoke to correct it. The plane leveled again, but her cheeks burned with shame. I'm sorry. I panicked, she whispered. The co-pilot's eyes softened for a second. Don't apologize. Just learn. This isn't about being perfect. It's about staying alive. The words sank deep. She nodded firmly, her jaw tightening. The radio spoke again. Prepare for controlled descent. You'll need to bring the plane down in stages. We will talk you through every step. Her stomach twisted. Descent meant landing would follow. And landing wasn't just numbers and dials, it was judgment, timing, precision. The co-pilot glanced at her. You ready for this? No, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Then she added, but I'll do it anyway. A flicker of respect passed across his face. That's enough. The first instructions came quickly. Passenger assistant, set your eyes on the altitude gauge. Begin gradual descent from 33,000 feet. Ease the yoke forward. Slowly. Her palms slick with sweat, she pushed gently. The plane responded, dipping with a smoothness that startled her. The engines groaned, but the numbers on the altimeter began to fall. 32, 31. Good, the controller encouraged. Hold it there. Do not rush. You're doing fine. A murmur of relief came from the cabin behind them, though she didn't dare turn around. Every ounce of her attention was locked on the gauges, the horizon, and the feel of the yoke beneath her hands. The co-pilot handled the throttles, adjusting power as they descended. His calm coordination steadied her nerves as though she were tethered to his strength. Step by step, they brought the aircraft lower. 28,000, 25, 20. But with every 1,000 feet lost, her chest grew tighter. The ground was no longer abstract, it was approaching. Landing lights would soon be needed. Wheels, flaps, decisions she had never faced even in simulations. The co-pilot's voice cut through her fear. Look at me, he said firmly. She turned. His gaze was sharp, steady. You're not alone. I won't let you fail. Understand? Her throat ached, but she nodded. His words carried weight heavier than any instruction. The radio chimed in again. Expect storm cells near the approach corridor. Visibility will be limited. Stay prepared. Her heart lurched. Storms. Of course it couldn't be simple. Outside the window, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, flashing faintly with distant lightning. The once peaceful sky now looked like a battlefield waiting for them. The co-pilot adjusted a switch, his jaw tightening. We'll thread it, but you're going to need to hold steady when the air gets rough. She gripped the yoke tighter, her knuckles pale. The storm loomed larger with every passing second, swallowing stars, swallowing certainty. Behind her, the passengers sat in silence, holding on to each other. Some prayed, some wept, others simply closed their eyes. None of them knew that the hands guiding the plane were those of a passenger who had never flown before tonight. She took a deep breath, pushing fear down into the pit of her stomach. "All right," she whispered to herself. "If this is the sky's test, I'll face it." The plane tilted slightly as it entered the first whispers of turbulence, the storm's edge greeting them with a warning shake. The descent had begun, and so had the hardest part of the night. The first burst of turbulence hit like a shove from an invisible giant. The cabin shook, overhead bins rattled, and passengers gasped in unison. A child cried out, his small voice carrying fear that words could never mask. In the cockpit, her knuckles tightened around the yoke until her hands ached. The co-pilot's voice came sharp and urgent. "Hold it steady, just keep the nose level." Her breath came fast, but she obeyed, trying to ease her grip, letting the plane ride the storm rather than fight it head-on. The wings rocked. The instruments danced wildly, but the aircraft held. The radio crackled with the calm but urgent voice of the controller. "Flight 317, you're entering heavy weather. Maintain heading 240. Expect severe turbulence for the next 20 minutes. 240, Roger," the co-pilot replied. His hand moved over switches with precision, adjusting power, activating anti-ice systems, preparing the plane for the storm's full fury. Lightning flashed outside the window, illuminating clouds that looked like black mountains rising in the night. Each flash carved shadows across the unconscious captain's face, reminding her of the weight of the seat she now occupied. Another jolt threw the plane downward, and the cabin erupted with gasps and muffled cries. A suitcase thudded in the overhead compartment. "Steady," the co-pilot barked again, his own voice strained. "I'm trying," she shouted back, panic rising in her throat. Her hands shook against the yoke as the plane bucked violently. The radio cut in again. "Passenger assistant, listen to me. Do not overcorrect. Gentle movements only. Think of guiding, not forcing. Trust the wings." She clung to those words. Guiding, not forcing. She loosened her grip slightly, enough to let the yoke breathe under her fingers. The violent dips still came, but now she felt them flow through her hands instead of against them. The plane steadied, not perfectly, but enough to stop the wild lurches. The co-pilot shot her a quick glance, nodding. "Better. That's how you do it." Her chest burned, but relief flickered in her heart. For the first time since entering the cockpit, she felt she wasn't just surviving, she was helping. But the storm wasn't finished. A roar like thunder cracked against the fuselage as crosswinds slammed into them. The plane tilted hard to the right, throwing her sideways in her seat. She yanked instinctively, too sharply, and the nose dipped dangerously low. The co-pilot grabbed the yoke with her, fighting the motion. "Not that much. Feel it, don't fight it blind." Sweat dripped down her forehead, stinging her eyes. She blinked hard, her chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. Fear screamed at her to give up, to let someone else carry the weight. But there was no one else. It was her, the co-pilot, and a sky determined to break them. The radio came again, calm yet firm. "You're doing fine. You're inside the storm's worst pocket. 10 more minutes, then you'll clear." 10 minutes. 10 minutes felt like 10 lifetimes. She locked her eyes on the artificial horizon gauge, the little line that told her where level was. Even when the world outside the window spun with lightning and black clouds, "Stay with the line," she whispered to herself, steadying the yoke with small, careful movements. The plane groaned, but it responded. Behind her, passengers clutched their seats, their silence louder than screams. A woman murmured a prayer, her voice breaking with each word. Someone else whispered, "We're not going to make it." She clenched her jaw, pushing those words out of her mind. She couldn't listen. She couldn't afford to. The co-pilot leaned close, his voice low, almost a whisper meant only for her. "You're doing this. Not me. You." Her eyes stayed on the gauge, but her chest swelled with something new. Strength. She hadn't believed it, not until now. But maybe, just maybe, she could do more than just try. The storm battered them again, shaking the cabin like a toy. Lightning flashed so close it lit up the cockpit in blinding white. But her hands held steady. Not perfect, not graceful, but steady. Minute by minute, they pushed forward. The altimeter ticked down slowly as they continued descent. 15,000 feet, then 12. The storm still snarled, but its grip began to loosen. Then suddenly, the turbulence eased. The roar softened into a hum. The clouds outside thinned, giving way to patches of open sky, faint stars blinking through. The controller's voice returned, calmer now. Flight 317, you are clear of the storm. Maintain descent to 10,000 feet. Prepare for landing instructions. The co-pilot exhaled a long, shaky breath. His shoulders sagged as if carrying a weight finally set down. We're through. Her own body trembled as relief washed over her. She slumped against the seat, her arms still aching from gripping the yoke. Her eyes burned with tears she hadn't realized she was holding back. But even in the moment of relief, her gaze dropped to the controls, to the altitude numbers ticking downward. Clear skies didn't mean safety. Landing still waited ahead, the final test, and the hardest one yet. The storm was behind them, but the real trial was still ahead. 10,000 feet and falling. The ground was no longer an idea but a reality rushing upward to meet them. Her hands shook as she loosened her grip on the yoke, but the co-pilot's voice steadied her. Don't think about the whole landing yet. One step at a time. We'll bring her down together. The radio chimed in, firm and calm. Flight 317, you are lined up for approach. Runway 27 is cleared. Begin descent pattern. Passenger assistant, this is where you'll make history. Stay calm. The words "make history" made her stomach twist. She didn't want history. She wanted survival. The runway wasn't visible yet, only darkness and faint city lights blinking far below. The vast emptiness outside the window felt heavier than the storm had. At least in the storm, chaos gave her no choice but to react. Now the silence demanded precision. The co-pilot adjusted the throttles, his eyes flicking across dials. Flaps at 1. Start slowing her down. Her hand reached for the lever, hesitating. This one? Yes, pull gently, she obeyed. The plane shuddered slightly as the flaps extended, changing the feel of the descent. Her heart jumped, but the co-pilot nodded. Good, that's exactly right. The radio spoke again. Speed should be reduced to 170 knots. Begin configuring for landing. Her mind raced. Numbers, gauges, instructions. Each one carried weight. She repeated them out loud, clinging to them like lifelines. Speed to 170.
Flaps set.
The co-pilot gave her quick, sharp instructions. Eyes on the glide slope. That diamond on the screen, keep it centered. If it drifts above, push forward. If it drops below, pull slightly back. Her eyes locked on the glowing diamond, trembling as it wavered. Every tiny movement of her hands shifted the aircraft's nose, and every shift made her heart slam harder in her chest. The passengers behind them sensed the moment. The silence grew heavier, broken only by whispered prayers. A baby whimpered. A man coughed nervously. Everyone waited, trusting a stranger at the controls. 9,000 feet. The runway lights finally appeared in the distance, 2 glowing lines stretching into the night. They looked impossibly narrow, impossibly far, and yet terrifyingly close. She gasped. That's where we have to land? The co-pilot nodded grimly. Yes, keep it steady. That's your target. Her pulse pounded in her ears. The glowing runway seemed so small against the vast dark earth. How could she possibly thread a giant machine into that strip? The radio cut through her fear. Flight 317, you are cleared to land. Winds are light, proceed. 8,000 feet. The plane rattled slightly as she corrected too sharply. The diamond slipped and the nose pitched higher. Easy, the co-pilot barked. His hand steadied the yoke. Small corrections. Don't wrestle it. I can't, she started, but he cut her off. You can. Look at me. She tore her eyes from the gauges to his. His gaze was firm, unflinching. Breathe. Trust the instruments. Trust yourself. Her chest heaved, but she nodded. Slowly, she guided the yoke back. The diamond drifted center again, 7,000 feet. The runway lights grew larger, clearer. Her heart pounded harder. Flaps 2, the co-pilot ordered. Her hand moved more confidently this time, adjusting as instructed. The plane dipped smoothly, engines humming as speed bled off. 6,000 feet. The city lights glimmered closer. Roads, cars, tiny dots of life carrying on below, unaware of the drama unfolding above them. 5,000. Her breaths came faster. It's too fast, it feels too fast. The co-pilot shook his head. It only feels that way. Trust the numbers. 4,000. The plane jolted slightly, but she corrected, smaller this time, steadier. The co-pilot glanced at her again, this time with something that almost looked like pride. 3,000. The runway lights glared brighter now, pulling them in. The radio spoke once more. Flight 317, you are on final approach. Passenger assistant, you're flying this bird all the way down. You've got this. Her hands tightened. Her breath caught. She couldn't look away from the glowing runway. 2,000. The plane's nose wavered slightly, but she steadied it, her movement smoother than before. 1,000. The co-pilot's voice softened, almost a whisper. This is it. Don't think about fear. Think about everyone waiting to touch the ground. Her chest clenched, but her focus sharpened. The runway filled the windshield now, bright and clear. 500. The plane roared forward, the ground racing up. Her hands trembled, but her grip held. 200. The co-pilot spoke again, calm but firm. Flare gently when I say. Eyes on the far end of the runway. 100. The passengers held their breath. The runway lights blazed. 50. Her heart stopped. The co-pilot's voice rang out. Now flare. She pulled gently back on the yoke, every nerve in her body screaming with focus. The wheels reached for the ground. The nose of the plane hovered just above the runway, the lights streaking beneath like rivers of fire. Her hands trembled on the yoke, every muscle in her arms locked in place. The co-pilot's voice was steady, guiding her through the storm of her own fear. Easy. Easy. Hold it. Don't yank. Just breathe. The ground filled the windshield now. Her heart thundered so loudly it drowned out the engines. Passengers behind them sat frozen, every soul holding on to hope and silence. The wheels touched. A shudder rippled through the aircraft as rubber screamed against asphalt. For a split second, the plane bounced, the nose threatening to dip too hard. Hold it, the co-pilot shouted. She steadied her hands, pulling gently, fighting the urge to panic. The nose settled back down, the landing gear thumping against the runway. They were down, but it wasn't over. The plane surged forward, speed still blistering. Lights raced past on either side, the end of the runway rushing closer. Brakes, the co-pilot commanded. Her hand flew to the lever as he worked the pedals. The engines roared in reverse thrust, the whole aircraft vibrating with force. Her teeth rattled, her chest pressed forward against the harness. The runway lights blurred, then slowed. The deafening roar eased into a growl. The speed bled away, little by little, until the impossible happened. The plane stopped. Silence filled the cabin, heavier than thunder, thicker than the storm they had escaped. For a long heartbeat, no one moved, no one breathed. Then a cry rang out, a single sob of relief followed by cheers, gasps, and clapping that spread through the cabin like a wave. People hugged strangers, tears streaming down faces. The baby wailed again. But this time it was a sound of life, not fear. In the cockpit, her hands still clung to the yoke, frozen. Her chest rose and fell in short, ragged breaths. She stared at the dark runway ahead, her mind blank, unable to grasp what had just happened. The co-pilot reached over, gently placing a hand on hers. You did it, he said softly. Her lips trembled. We landed. He gave a small, tired smile. We landed, the radio crackled again. Flight 317, welcome back to Earth. Emergency crews are standing by. Outstanding job. Her eyes blurred with tears. The words felt unreal, as though someone else had been at the controls. But no. Her hands had guided the descent, her fear had turned into action, and against every odds stacked against her, the plane was safe. The flight attendants burst into the cockpit, their faces wet with tears. You did it, one whispered, her voice breaking. She unbuckled slowly, her arms aching as though she had carried the whole aircraft herself. The unconscious captain was still slumped in his seat, medics rushing forward to lift him out. But the rest of the plane, the families, the children, the countless lives were whole. She stepped back into the cabin, and the cheers rose louder. Passengers reached out to touch her hand, some whispering thank you, others unable to speak through their sobs. Her face burned. She wasn't a hero, she told herself. She had only done what needed to be done. Yet the sight of so many faces alive, so many lives still intact, pressed into her heart with a weight heavier than fear ever had. As the plane was towed toward the gate, the co-pilot leaned close. You saved them, he said simply. She shook her head, her voice cracking. I was terrified. I didn't know what I was doing half the time, he smiled faintly. That's the truth about courage. It isn't about knowing. It's about doing anyway. Her chest tightened, tears slipping down her cheeks. She looked out the window as flashing lights of fire trucks and ambulances glowed against the night. They were waiting, ready to help, but they weren't needed for the passengers. For the first time since the nightmare began, she let her body sink into the seat. Her arms trembled with exhaustion, her heart still pounding, but a deep, overwhelming relief washed over her. She had boarded this flight as just another passenger, someone expecting nothing more than an ordinary trip. But fate had placed her in the captain's chair, forced her to stare fear in the face, and demanded that she act. And she had. When the plane's doors opened and passengers stepped onto the solid ground, many turned back, offering her grateful looks she would never forget. She didn't speak, didn't wave. She just watched, silent, still trying to believe it herself. The night air was cool when she finally stepped out. She looked up at the sky, dark, endless, filled with stars. The same sky that had almost swallowed her had also given her the strength she never knew she carried. She exhaled deeply, whispering to herself, "I was only flying commercial, until I wasn't."